Hi, I'm Kelly at Book and Paper Arts, and today I am getting ready to put some pages into some vintage covers and turn them into either art journals or artist books. It's going to be both, some of both. Today, this is not actually going to be a tutorial. I'm not going to start at the beginning and end it with a finished book. It's more as if you stopped by the studio today and knocked on and I said, "Hey, want to see what I'm doing?" And you said, "Yes, I do want to see what you're doing." Well, what I'm doing is taking a very damaged book cover to see if I can rehab it enough to turn it into something else. If you think you'd like to see that, if you'd like to see what I see when I find an old banged up cover, then please join me. Be sure and subscribe to my channel and turn on the notifications, and you will have more old book arts stuff in your life. Let's go look at some old covers. The first thing I want to say is, please do not yell at me for cutting up books. That's not really what I do. I collect old books, and I like turning them into other things. And the thing is, when I find them, they often look like this. Okay, I bought this. It's from 1713, so I was really happy with the paper, but the covers were Let's see. This is another book that I bought, and it's not valuable. It's an old maths book from 1850, and it's covered with vellum, which is super charming, but there's no need to try to restore this. This book, when I bought it, it was just a cover with no papers. Okay, here's another one. Beautiful, let's go up. A beautiful old piece, but, just because it was old, it's never been restored. So please understand that just because a book is old doesn't mean that it needs to be restored, and that most of the time when I have a book and it gets to me, it already looks something like this, which is kind of good because it means now I have permission to turn it into something else. Before I take a stab at rehabbing some of these to see if we can make a project out of them, I thought I'd show you what is inside these little secrets that are inside of old books. Back in the day, paper was very precious and expensive. So when someone was making a book, they would often use old paper from other books and manuscripts as part of the spine, part of the binding. They would just have these torn up as scraps. And it's extraordinary. There's actually a whole field of book forensics that takes these now. They used to take them apart, but now they use x-rays and they can see what's inside of old books without taking them apart. And sometimes they will find manuscripts from the 12th, 13th, and 14th century that were used as scrap paper in making at the time, new books. So anytime that a text block is being removed, for me, you never know when you're going to find extraordinary surprise treasure. This one, again, it's a maths book. Not really, it's from 1841, but it's not intrinsically valuable. It's not going to be restored. And here you can see the text block is coming out. And look what is inside. Some handwritten paper. It looks like it was part of accounts. And then some old hand marbled paper that would have been used Again, these were just kept in as scraps and put into the spine to make it more substantial. I will be saving those. Let's look again at this vellum book. It's, again, very damaged, but the vellum itself looks as though it was scrap paper when it was used to bind this book, because it's got some old handwriting on it. It looks as though it says 1717, maybe 1747. And so then this old vellum was used. And then inside, inside the gutter of the spine, there's some other paper with handwriting. So if the books do have to come apart, it is a great joy to see what's in there. Maybe hasn't been seen in centuries, but you just saw it. I am going to see what I can do with this, but it is very damaged. So, look at that. Quite a bunch of chunks taken out of this one. But I love that. To me, it's like some beautiful old ruin. I've already started with these two. And again, there's a lot of damage here. But it's also got some embossed work on the leather. And this one was like a prayer book, and it's got, you can't really see, it's not showing. It's got arches and other elements that look like old churches. But it's very distressed. And what I've done is, the first step is to clean it up. And actually, the first step, when I start cleaning up something that's got this much damage to it, is vodka. This is just the cheapest vodka that I can find in a spritz bottle. And that's because, again, a lot of these books that I find have been mistreated and maybe have a little bit of mildew or dust. And so I start by doing the best I can with that. And then if I think that there might be any kind of something that's not clean enough, I spritz the whole thing with vodka. I mean, okay, I'm not going to do this one. I'll do this one. Just like this. And that's because even though it's liquid, because it's spirits, this will dry. It will not saturate the book in a wet way. It will dry. And it will kill anything that is lingering there from years past. So I always start with a little sanitation courtesy of vodka. And once I had a motorcycle jacket that got mold on it, and I used vodka, and it cleaned it right up. And I wore it for about 17 more years. These books I have already started trying to reinforce that gutter where I'm going to be, the spine where I'm going to be sewing and adding my papers. You can use just something called book cloth or book tape, but I haven't got any. So I am just kind of messing about here. And I've got some old, very thin cotton that was, they were vintage pillowcases that I used for a million years. And when they couldn't be mended anymore, I dyed them in some tea. And so now I have these scraps. And that's what I've done here. I've just glued in some tea-dyed, thin tea-dyed cloth. Let's see. Here, I actually used mulberry paper first, and because it was really distressed and I wanted to give it several thin layers. So first a thin layer of mulberry paper and then a thin layer of this tea-dyed cloth. Now here I've got a decision to make. Do I want to bring my cloth, the reinforcement, all the way top to bottom? Now if I do that, it is going to reinforce the book, and then it's going to show through here after I add my pages, like that. Now, that's not bad. And again, it's going to, once the whole thing's finished, it's going to look a little bit more natural. But since this book is just for me, I'm going to take a chance and lean into that beautiful ruin look by only putting my cloth over the pieces that I'm not going to bring it all the way down here. I'm going to stop right there. And then when my papers are added, that's what you're going to see. I do not know how well it's going to hold together. Let's find out, shall we? Now I'm adding some glue to the cloth. I'm using a gel medium. You could use a PVA white craft glue. You could even use proper book paste. Heaven knows that's what they use for centuries. But I'm comfortable with the gel medium. It's just something that I use a lot, so I can predict out pretty much how it's going to work. And I'm getting a lot of my glue in there. Partly because the cloth and the paper itself are going to be pretty thirsty. Let's see. There we go. So I'm going to put this down now. And then make sure it's down on one side. And then kind of feed it into here. I don't want it going across taut. And then pull that down. And when it's dry, I can trim any extra. Yeah, that was very thirsty, and so I'm actually going to add some more on top to make sure it stays where I want it. It will dry clear, so that won't be a problem. But when I say it's thirsty, that old paper and cloth were sucking up the liquid that was in the glue so that there wasn't enough left for it to stick to the surface. But that's going to fix it, and I'm going to let that dry. While this was drying, I found another text block from a vintage book, and it also has that scrap paper from way, way back in the day, hidden away in the spine. It's just so mysterious. This is dry now. It's a little stiff, but I think that's going to be okay because this book is so damaged, it's going to need to be more robust. Let's see. The next step is going to be adding the pages. And I've got the signatures here. And the next step will be to sew the signatures to a tab that will be then glued into the middle of the spine. And I made one that just fit so that you couldn't see anything on the other side there, and I don't think it's gonna work. If I start sewing in the book using a 3-hole pamphlet stitch, there's gonna be a stitch, stitch, and then this stitch just is gonna be in the hanging out in the air. I think it will end in tears. So I'm gonna skip that part, and I went ahead and made a long cardboard strip, and this is from a sketchbook pad. And now I can sew my signatures to this longer piece. And while it will show, it's going to have a pretty patina to it that I think will look just fine with the book. I'm not going to show it to you now. I'm not going to sew it now because this is pretty fiddly. And I can see right now, I predict it will be one where I sew and then take out the stitches and sew it again, then cry, then take out the stitches and then sew it again. So I'm going to do that all off camera. But I will come back and show the book when it's finished. I hope next week, because I am making a lot of new journals to go in the online shop for next week. In the meantime, 2 more things. I wanted to show you something that I have been experimenting with this week, and that is rust and echo prints on fabric. This was the first time I had ever tried this. This is a heavy French linen that in its first life was a nightshirt that I wore for years with Levi's. And then finally I couldn't mend it anymore, so I cut it up into strips and boiled it with onion skins and rust in some tea. This is just, it's amazing. It's knocked my socks right off. I don't know what I'm going to do with this yet. I might make it into a fabric journal page. Or I might add some slow stitching and turn it into some kind of a patch that I can then add to another project. I don't know yet. Still thinking about it. If you'd like a video on rust, please let me know. I don't know much, but I'm happy to share what I do know and what I'm learning. Please join me in a few days because I'm going to have a tutorial on making parchment paper, faux parchment paper out of white paper napkins. I know I did paper napkins a few months ago, but I just tacked on the parchment part. This time I want to give faux parchment paper its full own video. If you have any questions, any feedback, please let me know in the comments, and let's compare us some notes. Until later, happy making.